Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. Daniel here, and welcome to the next part in the ranking of king. Okay, so when I was young and my family would take vacation, we would often rent houses in the mountains, by a lake or at the beach or something like that. It was a really fun and relatively inexpensive way for a family of five to enjoy a week together away from the city. These houses and cabins, they always had this really weird collection of like books and games. They would have puzzles with missing pieces and games, old board games with missing pieces, and they'd always have like just this incredibly weird collection of books. For some reason, I think every house we ever rented had a copy of Clan of the Cave Bear. That was everywhere in the 80s. That was a totally ubiquitous book. They would always have, kind of cheesy Christian devotionals with pastel, flowery covers, books about how like angels or heaven is real. Always have books by like people like Sue Grafton, Clive Cussler, Tom Clancy, the big sellers in the 80s, the supermarket sellers. And they would always, of course, have Stephen King. And I kind of developed this idea over the years that no one ever like goes out to seek to read Stephen King. Stephen King just kind of like comes to people because his books were just everywhere, and they are ubiquitous. I tend to remember just everywhere you went when I was young, there would be a Stephen King novel somewhere sitting there, or at sale at the checkout stand at the grocery store, at 7-Eleven. And often at these cabins and at these houses we would rent, the books would look like this, just completely beat up, old mass market copies that look like they've been read 100 times. And so this would be like the way that I would have read a lot of Stephen King when I was younger. And this is actually my favorite way to read Stephen King, in these old mass market paperback editions, especially these signet editions. And so when possible, while I am doing this project, this is the way I'm going to be reading Stephen King. So the Tommyknockers. This is my first time reading. This is one of the Stephen King books that I never read, and I'm going to talk a little bit about why that is in this short review. So plot synopsis, it deals with two main characters, Bobby Anderson and Guard. Both of them are authors. Bobby Anderson writes a little bit of everything. She does some Western fiction. Guard is mainly a poet. And Guard is he's a complete alcoholic, kind of louse, kind of an asshole. He likes to fight a lot and bicker. Anderson is really his only friend. But Anderson, she lives out in the woods near a town called Haven, Maine. And while she's out in the woods, she trips over something that she discovers buried in the ground, and it ends up being some kind of alien craft or artifact. And her and Guard work together to dig up this alien craft. And while they're doing so, they unleash an otherworldly alien presence that takes over the town and does very bizarre things to the town's inhabitants. The town, they start to change physically. They start to lose their teeth. Anderson undergoes a completely bizarre transformation. And in the process, all of the people in the town become these tinkerers. They start creating inventions and modifying inventions like vacuum cleaners and tractors and Coke machines, and they start developing them into like weapons, and they turn little toy kids' guns into plasma rifles and laser blasters, and they're doing all of this seemingly without a purpose except to destroy each other and maybe the planet. And as things start to progress and get more and more dangerous in the city, perhaps they're building some kind of nuclear weapon or something, and the people from outside the town start investigating. The townspeople start fighting them off, and it ends with this great climactic battle. So I avoided the Tommyknockers for a really long time because I had heard that it was just terrible. Famously, the Tommyknockers was written at the, I guess, the height or the depth of King's addictions, whether it be coke or alcohol. He was struggling a great deal at this time in his life. This was written in, I think, like published in around 1987. And there were some novels around this time, Cujo for one, where he doesn't even really remember writing. It was a pretty, he's kind of lucky to have lived through that time in his life, I believe. And I think that Tommyknockers is very much it's the logical outcome of that. It is completely excessive in every single way. It's nearly 800 pages. It is unhinged. It is oddly plotted and structured. There isn't really a hero protagonist to root for. The main character kind of becomes the villain, and there are a lot of issues with it. He continues to introduce new characters all the way up to like almost 50 pages from the end. And it's kind of like nobody was telling him, stop. I believe that was in his life, his personal life, and in his writing life. You know, this book needed a better editor, and I think his life also needed a better editor at that time. And so what you wind up with is this book that is just everything in the kitchen sink thrown together in a bizarrely plotted way, but one that I kind of liked. I was actually surprised how much I liked it. One of the reasons why that is because this happens to be King working in the mode that I enjoy the most, and that is when he's dealing with a whole town with a huge ensemble cast, a wide variety of characters, and he's developing an entire history of a place. I think he is awesome at that. You know, whether that's with It or The Stand or Needful Things or Under the Dome, I enjoy his books that take on an absolutely epic scope, and this is one of those books. Another place where I think King really excels is in short fiction, short stories. I think that is where he is his most literary. And the whole middle section of this book combines those two elements quite masterfully. We get chapters that read almost like self-contained short stories that deal with the different inhabitants of the town of Haven, Maine, and how the alien invasion, the alien presence, is impacting their lives. And I enjoyed that whole middle section a great deal. There's about 100 pages in the first section that I don't like, and then the end gets kind of messy, but I still think it's an enjoyable ending. But that whole middle section I thought was quite compelling, and I enjoyed almost every moment of that section. So yeah, it is oddly structured, late introduction of characters. The unhinged nature of the plot kind of it builds to a satisfying conclusion, I think. Even though it is messy, it does build with great tension and a lot of excitement. And so while it's kind of hard to tell where this novel is going, when it gets there, I think it lands the punch. It sticks the landing, and I enjoyed that. There are quite a few King connections here with other novels. For some reason, Guard, the second main character, he ends up kind of being the hero in a weird way. But for some reason, he has a chance meeting with Jack Sawyer, the boy from Talisman and the grown-up who later grew up in Black House. So he has this very odd meeting with Jack Sawyer for some reason. So in that way, King definitely places the Tommyknockers in the overall kind of Dark Tower landscape a little bit, just because of that little chance meeting. There are some characters from the Dead Zone mentioned, and the shop from Firestarter is also mentioned at the end. So yeah, overall, I'm glad I read the Tommyknockers. I don't think I'll ever read it again. It's too long. Stephen King himself said that I think he said that there's like a really good 300 or 400 page story in here, and I think he ended up taking that really good 300 or 400 pages and then adding another 600 to make Under the Dome, which is one of my all-time favorite King books. And there are a lot of similarities between the Tommyknockers and Under the Dome, and that might be why I like this so much. While reading, I was like, man, this has a lot in common with Under the Dome. And there almost is a physical dome over the town of Haven, Maine, that is keeping people out and keeping its inhabitants in while they are, fulfilling their master plan. The outcome and the purpose of the invasion, the alien entity, is completely different in the two, but there are a lot of similarities, so I think that's why I enjoyed it. Now, this is called the Ranking of King, and so we do have our ranking board here. It's a little magnetic board, and I have a set of labels, and I'm going to make one for each book that we read. And so the first was Firestarter, and so that's going to go right here. And then as we read more, I am simply going to ask myself if I liked the new one more or less with the books on this ranking sheet here. So this is going to be entirely scientific and 100% objective. No personal bias whatsoever will be entered into this process. Yeah, right. This is going to be my listing, and so take that with a grain of salt. I tend to have kind of odd likes and dislikes. For some reason, I don't set out to do this, but I tend to like things that other people don't like. I don't know what it is. I don't do it on purpose, I swear. And yeah, so I liked the Tommyknockers, a book that a lot of people don't like. And so is this better or worse than Firestarter? It is better. That's an easy one. So right now, the ranking of King is in first place, the Tommyknockers, in last place, Firestarter. If I die tonight, the ultimate scientific ranking of Stephen King novels is as stated. The Tommyknockers, the absolute best thing he ever wrote. Firestarter, the absolute worst thing he ever wrote. Yeah, wink, wink. So that's it. We're going to add to this as time goes on, and that'll be really cool. It's going to get difficult fast, I can tell you that. Next up is Desperation, which I'm almost finished with, and that is my second time through. And spoiler alert, I like Desperation a hell of a lot. That is a firecracker of a novel. Love it. But anyways, all right, guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed this, and we will talk to you later. Bye-bye.